All right, guys, if you missed it on the previous slide, Apollo 17 was the last Apollo mission that actually took humans to the moon. So I want to make sure I pointed that out. Continuing our thought, we were talking about in the previous lesson, we were talking about unmanned probes that we have sent out into space. So this series of probe was sent out, the Mariner series. It was sent out really before a lot of the manned missions like the Mercury program and all that. These were sent out kind of in between all of those, and well, throughout all of those, right? Because we had Mercury, right? And we had Gemini, and then we had Apollo. So these were sent out to explore the inner planets. And in fact, you're probably going to find different information if you look at old encyclopedias. Those are old books uh, that were trying to describe those inner planets, right? Mercury, Venus, and Mars, including Earth. The information is going to be limited. But then after these probes sent back their information, the information on those planets changes. And it's even growing more as we use different probes to explore the inner planets these days. Interesting. Look at this bottom line. Mariner 1, 3, and 8 were just simply lost. Crazy, huh? That's a big universe. Voyager 1 and 2. These are both unmanned probes. They were launched in 1977. Now think about the world in 1977. I remember it clearly. I was in 5th grade. Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie had come out. And so space exploration was something that was, you know, again, people weren't just thinking about going into space. The conversation starts to turn to how do you live in space. So these two probes get launched with completely different trajectories. In fact, they're both made exactly the same. They just have a different path that they're taking. They both have passed Pluto. They are in what we call interstellar space. And they're both sending signals back to the Earth, but because of how far out they are, I just looked this up and updated it. Voyager 1 is 148 AUs away from Earth, and Voyager 2 is 123. So now, think about this next line right here. A radio signal with information on Voyager 1 takes 20 hours to get to the Earth. Voyager 2, it takes 17. That's how far away they are. They emit a signal, we don't pick it up right away. It takes that much time for that signal to get back to Earth. They're still sending information back, and they're still out there. In fact, the premise of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which came out about 2 years after Star Wars, because the Star Trek franchise wanted to have something to kind of rival Star Wars. And the whole premise there is that one of these probes is taken by an alien species and equipped in such a way that it can carry out its primary mission, and that is to gather all the information that it can, learn everything that it can learn, and then communicate that information back to its creator. And in the movie, that starts to create some problems for the Earth. So you check that out if you want to. All right, so when we talk about space exploration, this is kind of a summary of the whole thing. Let's stop and think a minute here. We've done number 15, the two probes that had made it out the farthest is Voyagers 1 and 2. Okay, so let's break this down, what we have on the page here. Unmanned efforts to go into space. Sputnik obviously was the first one, 1957. And then the United States makes the Explorer series, the Mariner probes that we were just talking about, and Voyagers 1 and 2. Manned missions over on the right, we've got the Mercury program, Gemini program, and Apollo. And just to drive this point home, Mercury had one person in the capsule. Gemini had how many? 2. And Apollo, you've got 3, because it took 3 people to actually work everything in such a way that we can send people down to the moon and then get them back. And one of the biggest mysteries that we were trying to figure out is what is the effect of microgravity on the human body. So really the big study that's going on with the manned missions that you can't verify with the unmanned missions is how does this microgravity, how does this small gravity affect the human body. That gave us the information that we work with today with, some of the other things that we're doing, some of the other efforts that we're doing in space. All right. Lastly is Skylab. Okay, Skylab was assembled after the Apollo program closed out. They sent up different components of this thing into space, with an astronaut that would attach the pieces. And so they would send up one component and just let it be in orbit. And then they'd send up another component, release that, and then the two would get connected. Well, it's not ready for people to live in it yet. And they'd have to build the whole thing, the capsule come back down. And then they would finally staff the thing. They would staff the thing with 3 different crews of 3 astronauts each over a period of years. Now, I remember when Skylab came down, it was about a week after we moved to California, my 7th grade year. And there was this big talk. Skylab's going to burn up on reentry. It's going to splash in the ocean. What if it comes down and falls on a city? We're all going to die. And it was this big, huge thing. I remember listening to the radio. And I don't think they actually covered it live on TV because of where it was coming in. But I remember it being a big deal on the radio. So for number 17, America's first experimental space station was called what? Skylab. And the first components were put in space in what year? 1973. And it re-entered the atmosphere in what year? 1979. Uh-huh. There we go. And that wraps this one up, should.